Good evening. This is Gloria Taylor Brown, and this is a Gathering of Priestesses. Tonight we have a special edition of a Gathering of Priestesses with Miss Normandi Ellis, and we are so delighted to have her. We had a little bit of trouble getting her on the other day. She was somewhere way out in the country with a bad internet connection, you know, and sometimes things just don't work. We are become victims of technology. So based on that, she was kind enough to say that she would be willing to come back. And since, you know, Normandy is one, I'm going to say this while she's actually listening, and she can argue with me later. But Normandy is one of those people that is a mind that will only appear maybe once or twice in a generation. She is a brilliant writing teacher. She has the ability to work with all ages of writers in a way that I have never, and I mean never, seen anybody else be able to do. She is absolutely the most plugged in, psychic, what do you want to call it, with the spirit of Egypt, with the beings of Egypt that I've ever met. Her ability to stand and read the hieroglyphics on the wall, for one thing, blows me away. But beyond that, I mean, that's just a learned skill, you know, but her ability to translate them and to then translate them into poetry in her Awakening Osiris it's magnificent. And it is a book that I guarantee you will stand the test of time. And if you don't have it in your library, you should buy it now. And because, for one thing, I don't know how much longer it's going to be in print. But it is a beautiful, wonderful book, and it's truly remarkable. In addition to all of this, and you know, Normandi is a clairvoyant, she's a teacher, she's a traveler, she takes people to Egypt, and she makes the country of Egypt open up to them. It is as though you have the key that makes all the difference. But more important than that, and more important than all of those things, and those are all really important things, she is one of the most kick-ass girlfriends that ever existed.
Amen to that.
Yeah, she knows the words to all the songs she's ever heard, and she is a dedicated Kentuckian and a Kentucky basketball fan. She knows the Kentucky fight song. And I don't even
play it on my elbow.
She can play it on her elbow. You know, we are talking about a woman who is truly able to span a true remarkable level of understanding. And whenever you take it from the Kentucky fight song played on her elbow to reading hieroglyphics on the walls in Egypt, I don't know anybody else that has the breadth and the depth of wisdom that this woman does. And I really want to welcome you, Normandy, and you are my favorite priestess of Isis all time. So, Miss Normandi Ellis, I thank you so much for being on, and I think we'd better do a few minutes because maybe we have some new people here that haven't heard you. We do have 2 other shows. Just a couple of minutes telling us how you managed to become a priestess.
Well, I started translating the hieroglyphs actually as a college project. I was in graduate school. And so that sort of sent me into a 10-year process that became Awakening Osiris. And it just became one of those things that I had to continue to do. You know, it didn't matter if it would ever turn into something. I knew I had to do it because Isis told me I had to do it. I was like, okay. So 10 years after I start translating them, I finally began to publish them. And over a couple of years, I think it was not until the year 2000 that I was invited to meet Lady Olivia Robertson. My goodness, what a woman. And I have to say that had the honor of being made a priestess in her presence by her. You know, she's this little bitty tiny woman, and I'm like this 6 foot tall, you know, giant next to her, and she was putting this little crown on my head, and I'm like bending down, and I was like practically on my knees, and she was like, "Oh dear, just get up and put it on your head." You know, so I put it on my own head. It was really fun, and then you know, I got to go to convocations with her in other places in Chicago when Dina Buta was doing her ISIS conventions there, and I danced with Lady Olivia. She was 94 years old, and we were just like dancing together and looking into each other's eyes, and she was just the most wonderful woman, you know. So when she passed, the story, I'm sticking to it, when she passed, I didn't know that she had gone yet, but that night I dreamed of her. And she said to me in the dream, she said, "What will you do for the Fellowship of Isis?" And I said, "Lady Olivia, I'll do whatever you ask me to. You know, I'm her priestess." And she said, "Okay, done." And then I had no idea what I had just agreed to. So, but it's getting more and more interesting. There's more. You know, I thought, okay, I've written 11 books on Egypt. There's nothing else really that I'm going to be doing. But I'm finding that, you know, I'm gaining energy and wanting to put together conferences that are here in the Midwest, you know, rather than on one coast or the other. So kind of in the center of the country, and try to bring women together to study priestess culture, to study Isis, to work with the Egyptian mysteries. And actually this week, I'm contemplating buying a 7 foot tall statue of Sekhmet. In my backyard.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, I'm just thinking about it. It's going to cost a couple of $100, but you know, I think
$100.
the goddess convention, I got to have Sekhmet here.
Where did you find a 7 foot tall statue of Sekhmet for a couple of $100?
Oh well, it's actually 1,000 plus shipping. But you know, yeah. 1,000. I mean, really, it's a deal. And it's this beautiful statue that was made, I think, for an MGM movie set back when they really made statues like that looked for real. It's a Sekhmet, and a seated Sekhmet, and much like you would see, like at the Temple of Mut if you went to Luxor. And so I just thought, well, you know, she needs to be in my backyard. She needs lilies growing around her. And I have this vision of a grotto I want to build for her and for Isis, and to put them there. And I mean, I've already got a man who lives across the street from me here in Chesterfield who wants to create the hieroglyphs on the goddess tiles that will go around the edges of the door. So it's going to be beautiful. It's my vision now, and I'm hoping that other people can join in it with me. And just, you know, if you're interested in seeing Sekhmet in the Midwest and coming and presenting and learning, it's going to happen. I just feel it. It's going to happen. Within a year and a half to 2 years, it's going to happen. But she's going to be here this year. That's my goal.
Wow. Well, that is not only quite a goal, but quite a story. So I'm, you know, we know quite several people who have had stone statues shipped from. They haven't shipped from Malaysia. Where did they come from? And but yours sounds quite interesting, particularly if she's got the Hollywood background. Maybe she'll bring a little show business into your life.
I hope so. I hope so.
So she's, you know, one of the things we like to do is talk about one of the goddesses in this show, because what we found is that although we tend to sit here and talk like, you know, they're our next door neighbors who we normally talk to over the backyard fence, so there's some people out there that don't know who all the goddesses are. And so I thought that you would be a totally appropriate person to tell us who Isis is.
Okay, can I get up a second?
Yeah.
Just a minute. Let me get up.
Okay.
Here she is. Isn't she pretty?
Yes.
Yes, I got her when I was in Egypt this time. She is Miss Isis, is the Great Mother. She was the model for what later became the Vatican's version of the Virgin Mary, but Isis was also a goddess who immaculately conceived and had a heroic son who was named Horus. Many of the things that we learn about Jesus Christ are typical of stories that we've also heard of Horus. That doesn't mean that it's not the same. It's just that a heroic story tends to follow a pattern, you know, through many generations and lifetimes. Isis was the wife of Osiris, and when he died, and she didn't have a child at that time, so when he died, and he was torn asunder, she pulled him together and magically was able to conceive this child, Horus. And a lot of these stories, actually, that's a really short story, but a lot of these stories are retold in Feasts of Light. So if you look in there, you'll find some information on it. But yeah, she's my girl. She came to me when I was a child, and I didn't know who she was. I heard this woman kind of calling my name outside the door, and it was in the middle of a storm. It was snowing, and I told my mother that God's wife was outside, and she had to let her in because she was cold. And so my mother said, well, what's her name? And I said, I don't know. She's the Ice Queen. Well, I heard it was Isis. It was the Ice Queen. And so my mother said, okay. So she let her in, and she poured her a cup of coffee, and so my mother and I had coffee with Isis when I was about 3 or 4. And every time it snowed and there was a big storm, I always thought about her. Yeah, so here she is. Anyway, I'll put her back where she goes, or I'll just set her right here. She can visit with us.
Well, let's not break her. Right. That would be a tragedy. So
right. She had her. I carried her back this time from Egypt in November when my shoulder was really bad. I mean, I had a terrible shoulder. I had to have total shoulder replacement. And I got her this beautiful statue and carried her home because she had her arms up like this, and I thought, that's what I want to be able to do again. Just put my arms up, you know, like wings. And so there she is. She healed me.
Well, I want to applaud not only the fact you brought her back, but the fact that you just went into the pose, because
yay, I can do it.
It's always wonderful to be able to do that as well. So, and so anyway, let's talk a little bit more about, you know, you've kind of come down a strange and wondrous road, like all of us, that has ended up with you living somewhere in the middle of the country, and we'll let you talk about where you live and what you're doing there, and the you know, the ins and outs of all that. Where was it that you decided you were a priestess?
Well, I think it was. I think I knew that I was an old Egyptian scribe. I mean, I'm not going to say I knew that I was a priestess, but I knew that scribes were a priestly occupation. And I knew that I had to take these texts that had been woefully batted around by Egyptologists who really didn't have a respect for the culture, the way that I was coming to respect the culture. And I came at it as a poet, you know. I wanted to look at the hieroglyphs and make it so that it was as beautiful a language as I had found it to be, not some kind of magical gobbledygook, you know. Mm-hmm. So in the process of doing that, I was told very strongly by several people that it was just a bunch of hooey and I should put it away. And I could not put it away. I mean, I was so driven to work on this text that I knew it had to be from elsewhere. I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would hear the words in my ear that I knew I had to get it down. You know, they were being delivered to me. And the poetry book I just recently wrote was the same way. You know, it was language that was delivered from the astral that just kind of came through. So, and that's not to say that I channeled the entire Egyptian Book of the Dead, but that it would, those words would get me started. You know, and then
how you would say those words. How you would say those words.
How you would say those words. Well, it was in a different language, but it was a tonality. And then, like, I would hear that in one ear, and then in the other ear, I would hear what it was supposed to be. Like, it was like I had almost this guide that was telling me what I needed to write down, and then it would just go from there. And really, the language, if you're steeped in symbols, which is what Egypt is really about, if you're an artist of any sort, if you write poetry and you spend your time with metaphors, you begin to understand that there's a lot more than one meaning to a word. And so I was able to feel it unfolding as I was working. And besides that, I've always known that I was a priestess in Dendara. I didn't know it was Dendara, but I would have dreams about this place that had lion-headed fountains, you know, water coming out of the lion's mouth, and these beautiful open vistas behind these doors that would just like lead into nowhere, you know, into the desert. And I would see these places in my dreams, and I thought it was just a magical place, you know, like a dream place, until I walked around behind Dendara where they were excavating and saw the doorway into the vista out into the desert. And right above me, instead of at heart level where I'd seen it in my dream, right above me was the lion-headed fountains where the water came off the roof of the temple. And I realized that I had spent years there. I must have spent years there when the sand was, you know, up high as opposed to way down where it had been excavated. And it was real. It was magical. And I knew I had been there, and I could feel the night sky, you know, so close on my skin. It was just amazing. It was amazing, you know.
Now, it wouldn't have been called Dendara. It wouldn't have been called Dendara then. Do you know what the word they would have used for that area?
Let me see. I think it's something like, it's close to like the word that we use for Nephthys, like Nebhet. It's like the house of gold, or something like that. It translates as the house of gold.
Because I've when I'm there, I've heard a word, and you know, URN, and I don't remember now what they said, but it was definitely not Dendara. And
yeah, there's
like,
another word that's like it's like a UIT, asut, or something like that. There's another word, but I don't know if that's the temple. Gloria, I'm going to look that up and let you know.
Okay. Well, it's just, you know, we know different names are imposed by the invading armies as they come in, and, you know, like Abydos, I sometimes have trouble with the Abydos. I can't remember the word Abydos. I know exactly where I'm talking about, but the word Abydos for some reason is not the name of it in my memory.
Right.
And so I was just curious. And Dendara, I think Raven also has a really strong. Isn't that where your temple is, Raven?
Yeah. Yeah. It's chapel.
Yeah, you two probably priestess together.
Yeah. Probably.
Or maybe I scrub the floors for you, Normandy. I don't know.
Oh, I don't think so. I think I was fairly low down.
Yeah, well, maybe we scrub the floors together. But
Yeah.
when I go to Dendara and go into Newt's chapel, and it's a very small little chapel, and you look up, and Newt, who is the great sky goddess of the she's the Milky Way, she's the sky goddess, the mother of Isis and Osiris and Nephthys and Set and Horus the Elder. Anyway, she bends over, and her hands are so amazing. And all I have to do is look at her hands, and I am on the floor, uncontrollably weeping. And it just goes on and on. So
Yeah.
it's happened both. I've only been to Egypt twice. That's happened to me both times I've been there. And in fact, when I was at Nikki's house one weekend, all these people are going to Egypt, and I just thought I could never do that. And I was looking at this papyrus on her wall, and she came up and stood next to me and just kind of looked at me. And I said, Nikki, who is that? And she said, oh, that's Egypt. And I said, well, I have to go to Egypt and see her. And so I did.
Well, that's how many of your trips to Egypt have begun.
Yeah.
Just suddenly goes, I have to go.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. I've studied Egypt since I was 5 years old. So someone gave me the book, Mara, Daughter of the Nile. And I read it cover to cover. I read it a number of times when I was a child, but I loved and adored that book. It was the story of a slave girl who eventually became the wife of the king of, I think he was the king of Egypt. And it's, you know, it's just a love story, and it's a silly story, and it's intended for about 9-year-old little girls. So, but it had in it elements that awakened a memory within me. And we were living in northern Florida at that time, and I went into my mother and I says, I understand now why I have so much trouble in this family and why Daddy doesn't like me. And my mother says, well, what is it? And I said, I don't belong here. This is not my home, and you are not my family. I am from Egypt, and I know where I belong now. And my mother looked at me, and she's like, I mean, she didn't say get over yourself, because that phrase didn't exist back then, but it was like, I have brought in a very strange daughter. And she said, honey, you are our daughter. We love you very much. Daddy loves you very much. And I said, no, that's not true. That's not true. What you're saying is not true. I may be born of you, but I am not of you. And we lost Normandy. Oh, please come back, sweetheart. So, you know, it was one of those things where whenever it was very difficult for a while there. And my mother finally gave in to the fact that I was, you know, this crazy little girl. So I'm going to take just a moment here, folks, and see if we can get Normandy back on. I'm putting her up there. But, you know, I'm thinking about Normandy's story. You know, whenever she was a little girl, she heard the Ice Queen calling her from the storm. And I think that is the way that it works for people sometimes. It's not as though we went out and said, today I think I'll go out and buy priestess robes and become a priestess.
Right.
And, you know, I think it's sort of the same with you, Raven, that you know, it wasn't that all of a sudden you decided you were going to be a priestess and you were going to go to Egypt and, you know, do all these things. It was that there was something there that called us, that talked to us, that gave us that connection, I guess it was.
Yeah, and in my case, I was so different than everyone around me. And I had no clue about that I was experiencing till I was, I don't know, in my 40s. And so I just read books like crazy. and I just devoured it, and I had all that information that was just in me. I didn't know anyone else who read those things or studied those things. And I was probably I was in my 40s when I first started meeting other people that I could have that I found out had similar conversations. And it wasn't until I was 50 that I would say that I really took up the priestess path.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very serious about it and very committed to it, and still am. And, you know, all the things that I had been studying and reading came into play. It was like I was being trained. So no Ice Queen called to me, and I didn't have any dreams, and I didn't have that experience. But I certainly was preparing for a long, long time before it all came together for me.
Well, I'm calling Normandy to find out what's going on. If nothing else, we'll get her on by voice.
All right.
Technology, we seem to be overwhelming the technology. Well, yeah, you've got to come back in. Oh, all right.
Booted off.
Huh?
I got booted off my internet.
Oh, yeah, that'll do it to you.
Yeah, so I'm trying to get back on right now. So I'll be right there in just a second.
All right. Well, we're waiting for you, dear.
Okay, well, just keep telling them interesting stories about.
You're actually on speakerphone and you're on, so.
Okay, can you see me now? No,
not almost. She's almost here.
I'm almost here.
Yeah, one of the things that this is there she is. Wireless doesn't necessarily work all the time. Works most of the time, but. So I was in the middle of telling my great Egypt story, and we lost you. So we've gone on to talking about how sometimes you don't sit out and plan to be any priestess. It's not like you say, well, it's Tuesday. I think I'll go buy some priestess gowns.
Right. No, you don't. And when it's like, I have to say that for the longest time, I felt myself hiding under a rock. I didn't want to be seen as a priestess. It wouldn't, I'm a small town Southern girl, and I just stuck out like a sore thumb. Well, it could have been the blue jean cutoffs, but, that wasn't priestess robe.
Oh, I've seen pictures of you in those cutoffs, and that would have made people notice you a lot.
Yeah, 6 feet tall and legs up to here and hotter than crap.
Pretty hot stuff.
But, it's like you don't start out to become a priestess. It's exactly right. And you don't start out to become a clairvoyant. And you don't start out to suddenly decide, well, religion matters to me, but I'm not going to go for the traditional route. My spiritual life is expansive, and the truth of the matter is, most people these days feel that way. Their religious life is expansive. It's not to be in some little box. And it's funny. I was just ordained a spiritualist minister, and I gave this sermon on the temple within. And I was talking a lot about the idea of Moses standing in his tent of meeting, and talking face to face with God as if, they were equals. And how even the writer at that time thought that was an unusual thing to be able to do. And yet, people do speak to spirit face to face. They do talk to God. The goddess does come and visit us. And it doesn't matter whether, you're calling it by any other name other than what, it's Isis, it's the Virgin Mary, it's Yahweh, it's the whole deal. It's all together. The people who are spiritualists here are Buddhists and Quakers and pagans and Episcopalians and, all kinds of folks find that God calls them and wants to speak to them and wants to move through them, because we're in a culture right now where things are changing really rapidly, and the ante's been upped, and we just have to really open ourselves up to this more compassionate way of dealing with each other, which comes from opening yourself to spirit, and opening yourself to the divine feminine, because we've not had that for such a long time. And people are hungry for that. They're very hungry for that. And it's not possible anymore to just hide under a rock, and say, somebody lifts up the rock and go, I love Isis. And you shut the rock back down, It's like, no, you have to shout it from the rooftops. I love Isis. I love Sekhmet. I love Jesus. How about that? That'll freak some people out. I love Buddha. It's the whole thing, because all of that is part and parcel of the DNA that we define as God. So you can't hide it anymore. You just have to deal with it and be it.
Yeah, one of the things that I say in this about this group in this show is that I use the word the divine, and I refuse to use a gender-based word, because we're so gender-based in English, and because I believe that we are the eyes, the mouth, and the hands of God, and I don't care what you call God. As long as you're here to do good works, as long as you're here to heal and to help, as long as you're here to reach out and raise up another, I think you're probably doing the work of God. Now, there are some people out there that are doing the work of the other side, and they probably aren't drawn to my particular brand of religion, but I always found it funny. In fact, this last Christmas, I was at the nursing home, and I was feeding my husband, and somebody called me and said, they wished me a Merry Christmas, which I was okay with that. And they said, well, are you going to go to church? And I said, well, I'm not a Christian. And I may have said it a little snotty, because at that moment in time, I was feeding my husband. And for the next 2 months, they spent the time trying to show me how Jewish-friendly they were. And finally I said, although I really honor the Jewish people, and there are a lot of things that they do that I like, I'm not Jewish. And she says, well, what are you? Well, I said, well, I'm not Jewish and I'm not Christian. And she looked at me and she says, well, what else is there? And I said, well, basically from your point of view, I presume you'd call me a pagan, because I don't want to go into it too far with that particular person. She has very, very strict views about the whole situation. So, but it was funny, and it was like, well, there's only two. There's Jewish, and you could be Jewish or Christian, and that's it. Well, I gave up on those a long time ago. Whenever they told me in the Baptist church that I couldn't be the minister.
Right.
And if I couldn't be up on the stage doing the work, I wasn't interested. I didn't want to be the choir leader or the person who was doing the ushering. There was only one place I wanted to be, and that was center stage. And it was like, well, I said, does Jesus say that? And they said, yes, Jesus says that girls can't be on the stage. Jesus says girls can't be ministers. And I said, I bet Jesus doesn't say that. And I said,
show me where.
Who would tell me where he says that? And so by the time I was 11 years old, I was correcting my Sunday school teacher, and they were asking if I could stay home on Sunday morning, which I'd already been kicked out of the Baptist choir. I always took that as an example of where I should be going, and but finding who I was a journey that took a very long time, from finding who I wasn't.
Right.
Right, exactly. And I remember the same thing happened to me when I was much younger. I had very Catholic sort of cousins and aunts and uncles, and I didn't want to go to church, to the Episcopal Church or to the Catholic Church. I wanted to go to the place that I called my cathedral in the trees. where I could spread out a blanket on the ground and I could lie down under the trees, and I had these ball jars full of flowers and stuff, and I would lie down, and under this canopy of trees I would look at the blue hem of the Great Mother. You know, I was like 10, 11, but I knew it was the skirt of the Ice Queen that I was like lying under. That's where I was worshiping. That was my church, you know. And I watched the caterpillars crawl along, and I'd watch the water bugs, you know, skirting in the little stream, and I'd look at the rocks and all the shiny, and, you know, I was an environmentalist, but I was worshiping the natural world, you know. That was what it was about for me. And I was accused of being a pagan, and then as I got older and tried to, you know, make a point about how we have to take care of the environment and don't dam the rivers, and, you know, then I was a Gnostic, and then and all of that, I finally ended up saying, oh, you mean like what they call Gentiles in the church, you know, in the Roman Catholic Church? They were pagans, you know. They had names like Ammonius. Oh, wouldn't that mean his parents had dedicated him to Ammon? You know, a Christian, yeah, named Ammonius. Yeah, you know. So, yeah, for me, I love the idea of Alexandria, where everything was happening all together, and all of these religions were just talking to each other, and, you know, the Jewish fathers were rewriting their text, some of it for the first time because it was all in the oral tradition, and then the Christian, advocates were writing epistles, and they were writing gospels, and then you had the pagans who were still going on till 600 A.D., and then you had people coming in from Asia. I mean, it must have been a wild, wonderful place, and I just think that in a way, we're kind of in that culture again, you know? The world's becoming more Alexandrian, if you will. Does that make sense?
I love that. The world is becoming more Alexandrian.
Yeah, and they find the goddess at the bottom of the sea, and they're lifting her up, and you see the water like dripping off of her as she comes up out of the sea where she fell, and it's like, okay, she's home. You know?
Welcome home, Mama.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Isis.
Yeah, my son is named Alexander because for me, Alexandria was so important whenever I was growing up because it was the place where the books were.
Yes.
It was the place where all the books were, and I was always trying to find all the books. I remember going to the New York Metropolitan Library, and it is truly an incredible library. If you've never been there and you go to New York City, put that on your list. Go to the New York Metropolitan Library, the main one, downtown. And it will blow your mind. But what happened was I asked for a book that wasn't there. It was in storage. And it was like, oh, even they don't have all the books here. And that was the thing it was the idea that I could at any moment reach out and touch whatever book I wanted. And so for me, always Alexandria has been about, that's where they brought all the books. I mean, that was the mandate of Alexandria, was to bring all, to these, Ptolemy sent out writers to all over the world to gather books up and bring them back to Alexandria.
Right, right.
And I think it must have been a truly remarkable place that, you know, like you said, there was people talking different languages and arguing in the streets. You know, they were arguing in the streets.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. But, I mean, it was also energized from the sacred geometry and mathematics and philosophy and religion and, you know, astronomy. It just all of it, you know. How grand.
Yeah, so as we have moved into the new Alexandrian age, I like that much better than Aquarian because I'm not really crazy about most of the people I know who are Aquariuses. I mean, they're okay, but they're a little flighty. I mean, you got to admit they are.
I was just having a conversation about Aquarians tonight.
I'm a Taurus. I need a little more practicality here. And it's not all their sandbox. Is that right, Raven?
Hey, Normandy's the astrologer. I'm staying out of this one.
I bash no sign.
No sign bashers here.
Yeah, I'm not bashing it. I'm just saying that I love the idea of we're moving into the Alexandrian Age as opposed to the Aquarian Age. It's
just like God or Jesus or Goddess or Allah. We don't care what you call it. It's the same thing.
It's the same thing.
It's the same thing. This is an age of whatever it is, and you can call it Aquarian or Alexandrian or New or whatever, but it is what it is, and tuning into it is our opportunity.
Yeah. I have a friend who calls it the Cosmopolis, which I like.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Cosmopolis, of course, would be, actually, wasn't there a Cosmopolis on the Nile?
Yeah. This man was actually the one who first published Awakening Osiris. He was my first publisher. And he now I think he lives in Prague. And he's trying to get all the people gathered there again.
Well, I know there's a lot going on in Prague. I'm not sure what it is, but I know that there's a lot of energy moving there.
Yeah, there is.
But anyway, to move on from that, now let's talk a little bit about the here and now and the future and what it is that you're planning on doing. I know that you've got big plans and little plans and.
Yeah, I have little plans that are like stepping stones around all the big plans. So I'll just go chronologically.
Okay.
I teach at Chesterfield. I'll be teaching a class in metaphysical journaling. And I'm also teaching a class in Michigan on scribing your book of shadows and light, which is how to keep a spiritual journal or a book of shadows, which is a little more expanded than keeping a metaphysical journal, but kind of on the same idea. I'm going to North Carolina in about 2 weeks, June the 5th, and then in July, around the July 25th, both of these programs are called The Way of the Phoenix, and that's going to be in Ontario and Asheville, North Carolina. So Asheville, June the 5th, Ontario, July 25th. And the Way of the Phoenix is really about using your 3 highest spiritual bodies, the Akh, the Ba, and the Ka, to bring that energy down and transform the physical, the astral, and the mental bodies, and then pull them back up into sort of a Phoenix ascension type. That's like a Saturday workshop. And I'm teaching a class here at camp during the summer in metaphysical ceremony, the basics of doing metaphysical ceremony. I'm teaching in October. Let's see, what am I doing in October? Well, there's another class I can't remember.
Okay, that's okay. And then you go back to
I'm doing trips. Yeah, I'm doing trips to Egypt. The one in November is full, but the one for May 2016 is about half full right now. And I'm doing that with Indigo Run Love, and we are working on scribing and doing artistic projects and dreaming. So it's like a combination of working with Egyptian dream temples and symbols. And that's going to be the whole trip in May. That's May 5th through the 19th. And then from the 20th to the 25th, we're going to Alexandria.
All right.
So that'll be fun. Yeah, and it's going to be great.
So let's talk a little bit about the announcement that we sort of made last time we had you on, about you becoming the Archpriestess.
Yes. Yes, that was one of the things that Lady Olivia had in mind for me to do, was to...
Oh, no.
To become an Archpriestess.
Oh, gosh.
I'm beginning to create ways to teach priestessing to people in this community here, and to create a school, a metaphysical school, and a school that's devoted to Isis. And we'll start it here slow. It'll start on the internet, but it will grow with the grotto in the backyard and become something a little larger, I hope.
So you're planning to do an event at some point, somewhere between a year and 2 years out, that will be a conclave there in your area. So tell us about that.
That's right. I think what will happen is that probably not after I come back from the May trip. I'm going to invite people to come, and we'll have sort of a small gathering of priestesses to sort of plan out the big event. But I'm hoping then 2017 we'll have the big event here, and there will be. I mean, we have a hotel here. We have a cafeteria here. We have fire circles here. We have a beautiful grounds that are dedicated to, it's called the Trail of Religions, and it's all these, it's Buddhist, Confucian, Jain, and Iris. And so what I'm going to do with this goddess convention is to bring the feminine energy over to this side, to my backyard, to create this energy. And so we're going to make this grotto, as I mentioned, out of these beautiful Egyptian tiles, for one thing, but these images of the goddess and scrolls dedicated to goddesses in the various traditions, where we will have a place for her stories to be told, little niches where you can reach in and, on Bridget's Day, be able to pull out a text and read, and it'll be very nice. And there'll be precious stones, gemstones that are inlaid inside the grotto, so should be cool.
So you have a book that is in work right now, and
I do.
Tell us a little bit about that so people can go ahead and pre-order.
Okay, it's coming out in December of this year, and it's called The Union of Isis and Thoth, and it's co-authored with Nikki Scully, and she and I are basically, it's a book about how to create a sacred temple, not necessarily in the physical, but within your...
Give it a minute. Okay, we're experiencing a little bit of technical difficulty here. One of the problems is that whenever the internet gets a little wonky, I think she goes away. But the Nikki Scully is, of course, our dear friend and is in Eugene, Oregon, and they've been working on this book for years. This is the book that tells the story of the Egyptian mysteries, which they have been teaching. So I highly recommend it, and I'm hoping Normandy's going to come back in. And I think she's lost her internet again. But if not, you want to get that. Normandy's newest book, Imagining... There you are. You back? No, not quite. Imagining the World into Being is also available from Inner Traditions. You can order them online. You can pre-order the other. And if you have any influence with groups that you are part of or organizations that you are part of, please let them know about this and let them know about Normandy. I know I said a lot about her up front, but as a teacher, you can see she's incredible. And she is incredibly humble. and she, she's really coming into her own now. So I really want to be able to support her and support you in achieving your goals. And we can do that together. This is a community that we can raise the tide and float all our boats. So I think we're going to let that be it for the evening, and not try and stress Normandy out anymore. I love her so much, but technology is not her strong suit.
And neither where she lives is it probably a very highly supported.
No, probably not. So thank you so much for being here this evening. Let you know that next week we're going to have another one of our friends. We like our friends. Alexa McDonald, who is a beautiful artist and a singer and a songwriter and a ceremonialist, and has recently, well, in the last 5 years in my life, that's recent, moved up to Portland, Oregon, and is part of the the altar at Oregon Country Fair. And we will have her on next week, and I guarantee you that she is well worth listening to. Thank you all for being here tonight. And, sometimes technology just gets the best of us. And you know what I notice is sometimes it's when we're talking about these things that maybe technology is not so good at, the spiritual. So for what it's worth, we send you forth with blessings. We pray that you may have an absolutely fabulous week, and you may come back to us next week. Tell your friends about a gathering of priestesses. And also I want to thank my friend and my co-host, Catherine Ravenwood. She is the best tarot reader on the planet. If you need your tarots, if you need a tarot reading, she's going to leave me in a few minutes because she's got a tarot reading at 7 o'clock. So she is excellent, but she can be reached at kravenwood@yahoo.com. And I look forward.
My website is Catherine, Kathryn, Ravenwood.com.
And you can reach me at a Gathering of Priestesses online at Facebook at GloriaTaylorBrown.com. I do readings as well and work with people, particularly in the business realm. And I look forward to seeing you all next week.
Thank you so much. Much love.
Good night.
Good night.